Hey everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 17 of 100 Days of Kane, PA. And today we're going to talk to Bob James about outdoor adventures. If you know Mr. James, you know that he is an avid outdoorsman and he's had a lot of exciting things that he's gotten to see and do. But today's story is one that was a little bit scary and thrilling, but definitely has a good ending. So I can't wait for you to hear from him in his own words about a day out on the ice with Mr. Johnson. So I'm going to go ahead and flip you around and we're going to go ahead and talk to Mr. James. Hello, Mr. James.
Hi, Kate.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking time with us today.
You're welcome.
Okay, so one of the first things I want to talk about, though, before we even get into your story, is something that surprised me. Where were you born?
I was born in New York City in the Bronx, in a little section of the Bronx called Parkchester. I lived there until I was about 4 years old.
I can't believe it. Anyone that knows you, I think, would be surprised to know that you grew up in the Bronx.
Right, and I don't have the Bronx accent either.
That's true. So you, though, have been in Kane for many years. How did you end up here?
Well, when I lived in northern New Jersey through my teenage years, and I decided to find a college once I was getting out of high school that was in a fairly rural area. I loved Pennsylvania, so I applied to several and was accepted at Allegheny College, which is in Meadville, and it was a perfect fit for me. It was really an excellent school, and also was surrounded by woods and fields and lakes, so it was a perfect match for me, and that's where I ended up.
And your whole life, so you were born in New York City and you lived in northern New Jersey, but how did you spend your time when you were a kid?
Well, I was outdoors almost all the time. Back then, the section of northern New Jersey we lived in, it was beginning to turn into the suburbs, but not quite. There were still quite a few woodlots around, and I spent most of my time actually outdoors, exploring with friends or exploring on my own, just checking out plants, animals, just living in the woods as much as I could. My parents, whenever they wanted to find me, they'd go to the nearest woodlot, and I'd usually be right there.
So it doesn't matter where you were, that you were always drawn to nature.
I was. I think it's something that's inborn, and it was for me.
Mm-hmm. And so then you find yourself at Allegheny College, a rural college, and then how did you get from there to teaching in Kane?
Well, I graduated from Allegheny with a bachelor's in English, decided to take some graduate courses up at Edinburgh. That's where I met my future wife, Anne, and we became engaged, but she had an obligation to teach in Germany for a year. So I decided to go back to New Jersey, live with my folks, and get a teaching degree, which I did. It took about a year. So when she came back from Germany, we were married in March of 1974. Let me double check that.
Oh.
Yes, 1974. And she got a job with IU9, Intermediate Unit 9, and she had a job in Kane. I decided to try finding a job in Kane also, because we love the town, we love the people, and it seemed like a great fit for us.
Who hired you?
Laverne Johnson did, and to this day I wonder why he did. I got there to Verne's office. I had plaid pants on, a striped shirt, and long hair. As I mentioned, I kind of looked like I just got off the bus from Woodstock. Verne interviewed me, and he said, well, I think we could use you part-time for now. So I ended up working at the Kane Junior High at that time, teaching 4 classes a day to 7th, 8th, and 9th graders.
But the majority of your career, you were in the elementary school.
Right. Eventually, in 1975, I got a full-time position at Clay Street School, teaching 4th grade. When Clay Street closed, we moved to Chestnut, and that's where I ended my career.
Yeah. How many years were you a teacher?
Including the part-time stuff, probably 31, 32 years.
Yeah, well, you definitely significantly impacted many students along your time, and I think everyone knows you for your love of nature, and you're such a natural teacher, especially when it comes to those things. So I'm really excited for you to share your story today about an adventure that you and Mr. Gary Johnson had.
Right. I'd be glad to tell it, because that's one of those things you never forget. It's stuck in my mind and will be forever, I think. Gary Johnson and I were avid ice fishermen, and as it turns out, in 1998, President's Day, we had a day off from school. We talked to one another and decided that it'd be a good day to spend a whole day ice fishing. So we made plans to go to Willow Bay, and when you fish with Gary, you get there before daybreak and you fish till dark. So we got to Willow Bay, to the boat launch area, approximately probably, I guess, 7 in the morning. We checked the ice, and the ice seemed to be pretty safe, at least 4 to 5 inches. So we headed out about a half mile from shore, where we'd had luck before, and set up our tip-ups and began fishing.
And then there were some weird things that happened that day.
Real weird things happened. The temperature didn't rise much out of the 30s, but the wind shifted direction. Initially, it had been blowing out of the north. It shifted to the south, and I think that had a big impact on what happened to us that day. We were fishing and we're doing well, and probably about 10 in the morning, the first strange thing started to happen. I think I can best illustrate it with a tip-up, which I have here. These are the tip-ups we used when we were fishing. And around 10 in the morning, this happened several times to us. Our tip-up flag went up, our line kept going out, we'd set the hook, and whatever we were setting the hook on wouldn't budge. Several times we snapped our lines, and we thought, man, that must be an awful big muskie or a northern pike. At the time, we didn't realize it, but we weren't hooking fish. We were actually trolling. We were on an ice floe that was drifting, and as the ice floe moved, our line did too.
So instead of having something on the end of the line that was moving you were the ones that were moving.
Exactly, but at that time, we didn't have any clue as to that happening.
You were just thinking, that's going to be a heck of a fish once we get
A
it
heck
in
of
here.
a fish, yeah. And a second thing unusual happened that day around noontime. Up above the Willow Bay area, there's the Corydon Cemetery, where Chief Corn Planter is buried, and also Handsome Lake and several other Native Americans from the 1700s. Around noontime, from up in the general area of the cemetery, a pack of coyotes started howling for about 5 or 6 minutes, which is really unusual. Around here, we hear them evenings or dawn, but to hear them in midday was kind of a strange sensation and kind of unnerving a bit.
That is unnerving. And then it was coming from the direction of the cemetery.
Of the cemetery,
also.
right. Like,
yes.
This could be a harbinger of something that's going to happen to us. But the third really weird thing that happened to us that day was something in all my years of ice fishing had never happened before. We ran out of bait about 1 o'clock. Never happened before. So I said to Gary, well, I'll go in to get the truck, go up the road and get some bait. I picked up our bait buckets. I walked about 50 yards, and I looked out in front of us toward the boat launch. There was about 50 yards of open water. I looked to the left a little bit, open water. I looked behind us, open water. And I realized we were in trouble. And that's what I told Gary when I came back to him. I said, Gary, we have a problem. He said, what do you mean? I said, there's water all around us. We're stuck out here. He said, come on, that's not possible. He stood up off of his bucket and walked a little ways and looked, and sure enough, we were on an ice floe, basically.
So you were just basically on an island of ice floating
Exactly.
with no way to get back to shore.
No way to get back to shore. We were 500 yards or more away from shore. Luckily, there was another guy fishing in towards shore where it was safer ice, apparently. We yelled and waved to him, and he waved back, and first I thought he was just being friendly. But then we saw him walk to the boat launch and get in his truck and disappear. Back in those days, there were no cell phones, so we just kind of waited.
Oh my gosh, what were you thinking and feeling? Like, I can't imagine.
We were worried. We kept thinking, well, if he's going to get us help, we'll probably be okay. But, you had that other sensation where you could be thinking that this might be the last day. Mm-hmm. So within 15 or 20 minutes, we heard sirens in a lot of different spots. And then we finally saw rescue trucks come down to the Willow Bay boat launch. And we also saw a lot of commotion across at Roper Hollow, which is another boat launch up towards the New York line. Initially, we heard a lot of commotion towards Roper Hollow, and we saw a pontoon boat being launched there coming in our direction. The problem with a pontoon boat was that it could only get about 50 or 60 yards away from us and no closer. And we had tried walking a bit on the ice, and several times we broke through.
Wow.
So we just decided to stay in one place and hope for the best. So the pontoon boat went back to Roper Hollow. I said to Gary, they're probably going to have to get a helicopter to rescue us. But then 5 or 10 minutes later, we heard more commotion and saw a big plume of smoke over Roper Hollow, and we saw a weird-looking craft coming across the water towards us. The closer it got, we finally realized that it was a hovercraft. Hovercraft are capable of going on water and on ice. So the hovercraft had 2 rescue guys in it with all their survival suits on, and they pulled up to the edge of the ice, gassed the engine, slid right up on the ice, and cruised right over to where we were. They said, "Okay, guys, we're going to get you in the hovercraft, get you back to the boat launch. One of us will stay out here with your equipment. We'll make a second trip and get your equipment and the fish you caught today." So we thought, well, that's okay with us. So we got into the hovercraft, loaded us up. They loaded us up in the hovercraft. We went into shore. And when we got into shore, we noticed quite a few people standing there. And unfortunately, one of the groups of people standing there was from the Buffalo Evening News, and there were several news reporters from local papers. And we knew that we were going to have to do some sort of interview, that we were going to be a big story that night.
There's no hiding it, huh?
No hiding it. We actually felt like crawling back out on the ice and disappearing, but we couldn't. So we did a short interview with the Buffalo Evening News. The hovercraft returned all our gear and fish. We hopped in our truck and headed home. And we were the lead story on the Buffalo Evening News that night, Channel 4 News. And headlines on all the papers, local papers. So that's my exciting ice fishing story, and I'm glad I lived to tell it.
Yes, us too. And you must have had a great day if you ran out of bait
Right.
so early, and that's what ended up saving you guys.
That's what made all the difference in the world. Otherwise, we would have fished until close to dark and probably walked off the edge of the ice into the water.
Oh my goodness, isn't that amazing?
It is.
So have you ever run out of bait since?
Never.
See, it saved your life. That
It
is
saved our
awesome.
life.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
Just how fortunate we feel, my wife and I and my kids, to have lived in this area for as long as we have. I kind of wish that I had been born and raised in this area, because Kane's such a wonderful place to be. We've made so many good friends, and there's so many good people here. I just love the place. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, well, and your garden is no joke.
Thanks.
You have a lot of different types of vegetables growing. And did you say you save those throughout the year? So you freeze or
We do. We,
can?
we grew up in the 60s and 70s, a time when it was kind of like can your own food, self-sufficiency. And we do that. We can hundreds of quarts of stuff a year. We have winter squash and pumpkins that we store downstairs. We have a root cellar to keep other vegetables. So yeah, we try to live off the land as much as we can.
That's awesome. Well, I have a lot to learn from you.
Thanks, Kate.
All right, thanks so much for sharing your story today.
You're welcome. It was nice to talk to you.
You too. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. Wasn't that an exciting adventure? I can't even imagine what that would have been like to be out on the ice and not know if someone was going to come and rescue you or not. And so I'm really grateful that he was able to come back home safely and share the story with us today. And I know so many of us are outdoor people, and so I'm sure there's a lot of outdoor adventures that you have to share. So I would love to ask you to comment below with a story of an outdoor adventure that you've had in your lifetime here in Kane. So hey, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you again tomorrow for day 18.